There's a lot of people apparently frustrated backstage in AEW with creative. Also, we're going to talk about some major WWE plans, and it's all coming up right here on the Ango Show. Don't forget, I'm giving away this championship belt at 100,000 subscribers, so go ahead and click subscribe today. All right, everybody, I want to kick things off with The Miz. A lot of talk about The Miz this morning because Boozer Wrestling has come out, and there's a very interesting idea that has been positioned backstage within WWE, and it's the idea of The Miz turning babyface and working with DIY, which this is a very strange decision. I feel like this is definitely a strange decision, but ultimately, if you haven't been watching WWE for the last year and a half, they are in no rush to get people over. And that's not a bad thing, right? There's a lot of NXT talent. There was a lot of people rehired. There was a lot of people who were inconsistently booked under Vince McMahon. And when he had that, influence, DIY was one of them. Obviously, there's a lot of good things that could come from DIY versus Imperium. There's a lot of good things from DIY being a main staple in the tag team division, and I think their time will come. But I think working with a veteran that is recognizable could definitely help them. However, is that person The Miz? And I think that's a legitimate question to ask. And this is not like a knock towards The Miz, but I think The Miz is exceptionally great at being a heel. And I feel like the Miz being a babyface would be a very weird thing, especially just working with DIY. Now, obviously, I would be willing to give it a chance. It hasn't happened on TV. This is just, reports and stuff like that. But the idea on paper is definitely an interesting idea, and it's definitely one where I think people will have a bit of a pushback on. But I do want to point something else out. Boozer revealed a list of people who are all in line for the Intercontinental Championship story. Ivar, Bronson Reed, Miz, Shinsuke Nakamura, Ricochet, Chad Gable, and they're all in line for this. And, if The Miz is a babyface, there would be no reason for The Miz to beat Gunther for the Intercontinental Championship. But also at the same time, too, I feel like The Miz, he is one of the better IC champions that we've had in the last decade. But, I don't know if I would want to push Miz in that direction when there's other people I find more suitable. So it's going to be really interesting to see how things go down. Truth be told, I think when I look at DIY, the main roster audience, once they see them in the ring, everything is good. But it's the moment that they come out where people are like, they're not as interested. And I don't think that's an issue with them being fans of them. I just think not a lot of people are aware of who they are. You got to remember, when DIY was at the top of NXT, it was a different ball game. And then they went away and things didn't work out. I did like the stuff that they were doing with Ciampa and The Miz initially. So maybe there's some potential there. But this is definitely one to pay attention to. And hopefully they could pull it off. If they do decide to go this route, hopefully they pull it off. But I think Miz is way better suited as a heel. WWE is calling up Brutus Creed and Julius Creed, the Creed brothers. And it looks like it's going to be happening alongside Ivy Nile. This should be interesting, right? I think this is an interesting topic, considering the fact that the Creed brothers, I feel like they've done pretty much everything they could in NXT. Look, we already know a couple things. We already know Boozer was doing the rundown for Raw. We already know Creed Brothers versus Alpha Academy is going to be happening on Raw tonight. Boozer confirmed that Ivy Nile will be a part of that, which I think is an interesting choice because Ivy Nile could be a legitimate competitor in the women's division for WWE Raw. If this is kind of like a slow burn, get her acclimated to the main roster, put her on TV, let people really know who she is and figure her out. This could be a good thing, right? She doesn't have to wrestle as many matches, but she'll be with the Creed brothers. They don't lose their presentation. They get to keep their package that they had in NXT. I think that makes a lot of sense. Dave Meltzer also confirmed the news. He said he was told tonight that right now, barring any changes, and it's not 100%, but right now they are being called up. So obviously it's an interesting choice, right? The Creed brothers spent a lot of time in NXT. Boozer's confirming it. Meltzer's confirming it. At this point, multiple sources are confirming it. I hope they do well in the main roster. My thing is the tag team division is starting to pick up a little bit, right? We're seeing that a little bit more now on TV, but in the last few months, or really in the last few years, I don't feel like the tag team division meant much. Jay and Cody just had a 10-day reign. I think really the part that really needs to be talked about is splitting up those tag team belts, because once those tag team belts are split up, Raw has its own champions, SmackDown has its own champions, and then at that point, it could be a lot more beneficial for the Creed brothers. They're incredibly talented in the ring, and I don't like to pick one over the other, but I think Julius Creed also has a very strong chance of being successful as a singles guy in WWE. It's not going to happen in the first year or the 2 years, but just how we talk about the Street Profits and them going singles, I could see the same thing being done with the Creed brothers, which is part of the problem with the tag team division in WWE. There's not that much focus on them, but then eventually tag teams split up and they go the singles route, which obviously hurts the tag team division. So if WWE continues putting a little bit more attention on the tag team division, obviously DIY, Imperium, Creed brothers, there's gonna be a lot of banger ass matches on this card, right? Like, you'll be watching the card from top to bottom. You'll see some great matches for the tag team belts, and then that's not even factoring like the New Day or Viking Raiders, and that's just for Raw. So this is something I want to pay attention to. I hope WWE gets it right. It's a very, very big decision for them to do this, and I'm curious to see what the reaction is like. But if they can pull off a great win against Alpha Academy, I think it changes a lot for them. But also at the same time, too, we're talking about Chad Gable potentially becoming Intercontinental Champion, possibly finishing his story with Gunther. Then I think perhaps at this point, they might split up. Otis goes his own way. Chad Gable goes his own way. This could be a really good thing for the Creed brothers. And that's actually going to bring us to our final topic of today's video. AEW talent are reportedly frustrated with late creative decisions. Wow. Dave Meltzer was talking about this. And obviously, I tell you guys all the time, it's just we're doing this for discussion purposes. But Dave Meltzer was talking about creative plans have been finalized a lot later than usual as of late. And basically, this has led to AEW talent not being happy whatsoever about it and being incredibly frustrated. He says so much of the stuff is, if you follow AEW, a lot of stuff is being decided at much later periods than previously. Guys are getting their information on what they're doing later, and decisions are being made later, so it's just how it is. I mean, there's time on the day of the show when you don't even know. It's almost like when we talk about WWE, which is also very frustrating for talent. It's like a lot of the guys who have input on what they're doing, and they know the stuff that they're doing, but they don't really know a long-term direction. So they're doing stuff and they're coming up with ideas, but when you don't really know exactly the long-term direction, then you're kind of coming up with ideas week to week. Two, but if you don't know where the ultimate thing is, you don't know where the ultimate thing is. Okay. And maybe the ultimate thing hasn't even been decided, so that's one of the reasons why the shows are like the shows last week. Interesting stuff coming from Meltzer. You know, the thing is, my position has remained the same, right? If AEW talent are frustrated about it, they have every right to be, right? Just like WWE talent have everything right to be. For the fans who are coming out against WWE or AEW in this type of situation, I say this all the time. You're not supposed to be privy to that information. As a fan, when the script gets made, how it gets made, that shit doesn't matter to you. That's not information you're supposed to know. It's not information you're technically allowed to know, right? You're not backstage. So I see a lot of people who got frustrated with Vince McMahon about it, and obviously everybody's going to be frustrated. Fans are going to be frustrated. But at the end of the day, we're not supposed to know that. I think people use it as a way to justify if a show is good or bad. Oh, well, they keep changing the script, or they're doing things last minute. They're not thinking things through. I think they get frustrated by that. But with AEW and WWE, I know obviously it's not been an issue as of late with WWE because Triple H takes over creative. But this is not really a big issue for AEW in the long term either. It could easily be solved. I think everything is just having the right process, and I think that's really what it comes down to. So I don't think it's bad for AEW. I don't think it's bad for WWE, because at the end of the day, when the script gets written or published or whatever it may be, that's not our job. That's not our thing to know. With that being said, though, on the flip side of it, if your product is doing terrible and you're scripting things last second and you don't have plans, obviously that's a lot different. But I think AEW's product in the last few weeks has been pretty freaking solid. So not really a concern to me. I want to know what you guys think down below. Don't forget, I'm giving away this championship belt at 100K. I'll see you next time.